In the rolling hills of Ashanti, where the earth whispered ancient secrets and the winds carried stories from distant lands, lay the village of Isiama. It was a village of clay huts and palm trees, of children playing barefoot in the dust, and elders telling tales under the shade of the great baobab tree. Isiama was a place where the villagers lived simply but with joy, cultivating the fertile land and relying on their community to thrive. Among them was Adama, a young woman whose name meant first daughter in their language. Adama was admired by all who knew her for her grace, her laughter that rang like a song, and her kindness that wrapped around others like a warm blanket. Her father, Kofi, a quiet, elderly man, raised her in their modest hut on the outskirts of the village. Though they had little, Adama was content, for she found joy in the small things, the sun rising over the hills, the scent of fresh bread baking in the morning, and the sound of children playing near the river. Yet, as much as she loved her father and village, Adama harbored a deep longing. She dreamt of a life filled with more wealth, more comfort, more opportunities to help those she loved. Every evening, she sat by the small fire outside her hut, her thoughts drifting like the smoke rising into the night sky. She wondered if there was more to her destiny than simply tending the land. Her father, though old and frail, often shared his wisdom with her. Adama, my child, he would say, wealth and luxury come to those who are patient, those who give without expecting. The earth will reward you, but only if your heart is pure. But Adama could not escape the nagging desire to change her life, to rise above the ordinary. She wanted her father to rest without the burden of work, to see him in a place of ease and comfort. She longed for the village to look upon her as something more than just the simple daughter of Kofi, the old farmer. She wanted to be remembered, to be someone special. The mysterious encounter. One day, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Adama ventured into the forest to gather firewood. The towering trees stretched up to the heavens, their leaves whispering in the wind. The path she took was familiar to her, one that led to the edge of the great whispering forest, a place known for its strange energy and mysterious happenings. The villagers rarely ventured into the forest, for it was said to be enchanted, home to spirits and ancient magic. Adama was no stranger to the forest, but this day felt different. As she walked deeper into the woods, the trees seemed to close in on her, their shadows long and twisted. The air grew cooler, and a faint rustling sound echoed through the trees. Adama paused, her heart quickening. She had heard stories of travelers who had ventured into these woods and never returned. But her curiosity pushed her forward. After some time, she reached a clearing where the sunlight broke through the canopy in golden shafts. There, in the middle of the clearing, stood an old woman. Her hair was white as snow, her face wrinkled like the bark of an ancient tree, and her clothes were a patchwork of brightly colored fabrics. In her hands, she held a small bundle wrapped in cloth. The woman's eyes, though aged, sparkled with an otherworldly light. Adama felt an odd sensation wash over her, fear, curiosity, and awe all at once. The woman looked up, as though sensing her presence, and smiled. "Oh, child," the old woman said in a voice like the rustling of leaves, "I have been waiting for you." Adama stepped forward, unsure of what to say. You have been waiting for me." The woman nodded, her eyes twinkling. "Yes, Adama. I know your heart, your dreams, your desires. You seek more than what this village can offer. You wish for wealth and prosperity, do you not?" Adama's breath caught in her throat. How could the woman know her secret? She nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I want more. I want to change my life and my father's." The old woman chuckled softly, her laughter like a breeze stirring the leaves. "Oh, but the price of such desires is not always clear. I can grant you your wish, but there is a condition." Adama felt a twinge of caution. "What condition?" "You must promise me one thing," the woman said, her gaze piercing Adama's soul. "You must never share your good fortune with anyone, not your father, not your friends, and most of all, not your closest companion. Keep it a secret, or the magic will fade, and the world will turn against you." Adama's heart pounded in her chest. The promise seemed simple enough. She had no intention of boasting about her success. Her desires were private, she only wanted to help her father. She nodded eagerly. "I promise," she said, her voice firm. The old woman smiled, and from within her bundle, she revealed a small, glowing stone. It shimmered with an iridescent light, as though it contained the essence of the stars themselves. "Take this, child," the woman said, handing it to Adama. "This stone will grant you your wish, but remember the warning I have given you." Adama took the stone with trembling hands. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "Remember," the old woman said as she began to fade into the shadows of the forest, "you may have all that you desire, but you must keep the secret, or the curse will follow." With that, the woman disappeared, leaving Adama standing alone in the clearing, the stone glowing softly in her hand. The magic unfolds. Adama returned to the village with a heart full of hope and excitement. She could hardly wait to see the magic unfold. That night, under the light of the full moon, she whispered her wish aloud. "I wish for prosperity, for wealth beyond measure, for comfort and ease for my father and me." The stone in her hand pulsed with a warm light, and she felt a strange energy surge through her. The air seemed to hum with power, and for a moment everything around her grew still. Then, as if in response to her wish, a soft breeze stirred, carrying with it the scent of blooming flowers. The next morning, as Adama walked through the village, something miraculous happened. The crops in her field, which had been struggling, suddenly flourished. The plants grew taller, their fruits ripening in a matter of hours. Her father, who had been frail and sickly for years, stood up from his mat, his strength returned, his body youthful once again. Adama couldn't believe her eyes. The wealth she had longed for was beginning to materialize. But as the days passed, Adama's excitement began to grow. Her crops yielded more than enough to feed the entire village. She rebuilt her father's hut with fine wood and painted the walls in vibrant colors. The villagers began to notice the changes, and soon, they gathered around her, admiring her good fortune. But in the back of her mind, the old woman's words lingered, "Never share your good fortune." Yet, in her joy, Adama couldn't resist. She ran to her best friend Kobina, eager to tell him about the miracle that had taken place. "Kobina," she said breathlessly, "you won't believe what has happened. My fields are overflowing, my father is well again, and everything has changed. I have a secret, something magical that has brought me all this wealth." Kobina looked at her, wide-eyed with disbelief. "What is the secret?" he asked. Adama, unable to contain herself, revealed the glowing stone and told him everything. She even told him about the old woman in the forest and the promise she had made. The moment the words left her lips, Adama felt a sudden coldness spread through her body. She shivered, as though a shadow had passed over her heart. She didn't understand it, but something had changed. That night, as she lay in her bed, Adama felt a strange unease settle over her. The village seemed quieter, and the air, once filled with warmth, felt heavy. She closed her eyes, praying that her secret would not unravel the happiness she had gained. In the days following her confession to Kobina, Adama's world seemed to expand in ways she had never imagined. The village, once a modest collection of huts, had begun to change. People gathered at her doorstep, eager to see her success firsthand. Her wealth seemed limitless, every wish she made was granted with the snap of her fingers. Her crops were bountiful beyond measure, the cattle she raised grew fat and strong, and the river that ran nearby sparkled as though it had been washed clean by the gods themselves. For a brief moment, Adama thought her dreams had finally come true. But even as her wealth flourished, something deep within her began to shift. It was subtle at first, an unease that nestled in her chest like an unwanted guest. The villagers, who once greeted her with smiles and admiration, now looked at her with an odd expression. It wasn't the same warmth and appreciation she had once known. They were grateful for the food she shared, the gifts of prosperity she gave freely, but there was a distance in their eyes, a quiet suspicion that she could not quite place. The people she had once called friends now whispered behind her back, their voices barely audible. Adama caught snippets of their conversations, and though she couldn't make out every word, she understood the tone: envy, fear, and uncertainty. Some were puzzled by her sudden rise, others were afraid of the change that came with it. They wondered if she had made a deal with dark forces, and that suspicion began to seep into her every interaction. It wasn't just the villagers who seemed to distance themselves. Her father, Kofi, was becoming increasingly withdrawn. Although his body was strong and his mind sharp, he often stared off into the distance, muttering to himself in the quiet hours of the evening. Adama tried to speak to him, but his gaze seemed distant, as if he was looking at something far beyond their small hut. "Father," Adama said one evening, as they sat in the dim glow of their fire, "what troubles you? You seem so distant, so unlike the man I've known all my life." Kofi looked at her with tired eyes, his brow furrowing as if he were trying to gather his thoughts. "Adama," he said slowly, "there is something unnatural about this, all of this. It comes too quickly. Too easily. Adama was taken aback by his words. But father, you've seen how things have changed. The crops, the cattle, my health, everything is better now. This is what I've always dreamed of for us. Kofi shook his head, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the edge of his seat. I know, my child, but at what cost? Have you forgotten the old stories of the forest, the ones the elders tell? You cannot take from nature without giving something back in return. There is a balance, and when that balance is disrupted, things go wrong. Adama felt a knot form in her stomach. She had heard the stories too, of course, stories of spirits that guarded the forest, of curses that followed those who tampered with magic. But she dismissed them as superstition, nothing more than the ramblings of old men and women trying to keep the younger generation in check. But now, with her father's words ringing in her ears, she began to wonder if there was some truth to them. The price of sharing the secret. It wasn't long before Adama's secret began to unravel in ways she could never have anticipated. The very moment she had shared her good fortune with Kobina, she had unknowingly set off a chain of events that would alter her life forever. That night, as she lay in bed, unable to shake the strange feeling that had taken root in her heart, she was jolted awake by a terrifying sound. It was a loud, guttural howl, a sound unlike any animal Adama had ever heard. Her heart raced as she sprang from her bed, running to the doorway. The village was dark and silent, save for the eerie sound that echoed through the night. The howl came again, followed by the rustling of leaves and the distant cracking of branches. Someone, was out there, lurking in the shadows. Adama stepped outside, her bare feet sinking into the cool earth. She peered into the darkness, trying to make out any sign of what was causing the noise. The wind howled through the trees, but the forest seemed unusually still. A sense of dread clung to the air like fog, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Her gaze turned toward the village center, where she saw several villagers gathered in a circle. They were whispering urgently to one another, their faces anxious and strained. As Adama approached, she overheard fragments of their conversation. Do you think she's cursed? One man asked, his voice trembling. Another replied, I don't know, but the signs are clear. Ever since she shared her secret, things have been off. The crops are growing too fast, the animals are acting strange, and now, this howl. It's like something is trying to warn us. Adama's heart sank as she listened. The village was beginning to suspect her. The fear in their voices was palpable, and it seemed that they were no longer grateful for her prosperity. They feared her. Her thoughts turned to the old woman in the forest, and the promise she had made. Never share your good fortune. The weight of her mistake pressed heavily on her chest. She had told Kobina, and now the villagers were beginning to sense something was wrong. She had broken the rule, and now the magic was unraveling around her. A mysterious visitor. The next morning, as Adama went about her usual routine, she noticed something strange. The once healthy crops were beginning to wilt. The cattle, which had been so fat and strong, now looked thin and sickly. The earth itself seemed to groan under the weight of her wish. It wasn't long before a mysterious visitor arrived at the village. Adama was working in her field when she saw a figure approaching. A tall man, his skin as dark as the night sky, walked toward her. His clothes were simple but well made, and he carried a staff adorned with feathers and beads. His presence seemed to radiate power, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had seen countless ages. I am Osei, a traveler from the north, he said. I've come to speak with you, Adama. The spirits of the forest have sent me. Adama's heart skipped a beat. The spirits. What did this man know of the magic she had used? She motioned for him to sit with her under the shade of a nearby tree. I've heard of your fortune, Osei said, his eyes narrowing with a knowing gaze. But you've disturbed the balance, child. The spirits are restless, and the price of your wish will be steep. Adama's pulse quickened. What do you mean? I've only wished for prosperity. There's no harm in that. Osei shook his head slowly. The harm lies not in the wish itself, but in the greed that follows it. You have shared your good fortune, and now the curse will follow. You must undo what you have done before it is too late. Adama's heart sank. But how? How do I undo it? The man's gaze softened. You must return the stone. Only then can you restore balance. But be warned, the journey will be perilous. The spirits will not forgive so easily. Adama felt a cold sweat form on her brow. The task before her seemed impossible. But deep down, she knew what she had to do. She had to return the stone and make things right, before the curse consumed everything she loved. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the village of Isiama, Adama sat in her heart, the weight of Osei's words pressing on her chest like a stone. The spirits were angry. The price of her wish was steep, and there was only one way to make things right. She had to return the stone to the forest. But how? The forest was a vast and untamed place, full of spirits and dangers that even the bravest of villagers feared. And yet, she knew in her heart that there was no other choice. The thought of facing the forest alone filled her with dread. She could feel the tension in the village, the growing suspicion and fear. The villagers had begun to whisper more openly now, their faces filled with unease whenever they saw her. They avoided her, as though her prosperity was some kind of illness that might infect them. Even Kobina, her best friend, had begun to distance himself. He no longer looked at her with admiration, but with a kind of wariness. It was as if he, too, had felt the invisible line that had been crossed when she shared the secret. Her father, Kofi, had grown even more distant. At night, he would sit in silence, staring at the fire as though seeing something beyond it, something no one else could. The old stories of the forest, which he had once told with such reverence, now seemed to haunt him. "Father," Adama said one evening, taking his hand in hers. "I have to go. I need to return the stone to the forest. I need to make things right." Kofi's eyes were dim with worry, and for the first time, Adama saw something like fear in them. "Adama, my child," he said softly, "the forest is not what it once was. The spirits are restless, and the magic that once flowed through it has become corrupted. You are not the first to seek its power, and you will not be the last. But many have gone before you, and they did not return." Adama's heart twisted in her chest. She had heard the stories of those who ventured into the forest in search of magic, heroes, adventurers, and even those with good intentions. But none of them had come back. The whispers spoke of them as lost souls, trapped by the forest spirits, their bodies never found, their names forgotten. "I must go," she said firmly, standing up. "I have to undo the damage I've caused." Kofi looked at her for a long moment, his eyes searching her face as if he were trying to see something deeper, something she hadn't yet understood. "Be careful, my daughter. The forest will test you. And sometimes, the greatest danger is not what you face outside, but what you carry within." Into the heart of darkness. The next morning, with a heavy heart and a mind filled with fear, Adama set out for the forest. She carried the stone in her hand, wrapped tightly in cloth. The air was thick with tension, and the village felt colder than usual. The villagers watched her from a distance, their eyes filled with suspicion and uncertainty. None of them spoke to her, and none of them offered to join her. She was alone, as she had always been. As she walked toward the edge of the forest, the trees seemed to close in around her, their branches twisting like fingers reaching for the sky. The forest was a place of shadows and secrets, where even the light of the sun struggled to penetrate. The path she walked was narrow, barely wide enough for a single person, and the ground beneath her feet was uneven, covered in thick roots and patches of moss. Every step she took seemed to echo through the stillness, as though the forest itself was listening. The further she ventured, the more oppressive the air became. The once familiar sounds of birds and insects were replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves. It was as though the forest was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Hours passed, and the path seemed to twist and turn in impossible ways. Adama began to wonder if she was walking in circles, if the forest itself was shifting around her. She felt the pull of something deeper within, something ancient and powerful. The stone in her hand grew warmer with every step, as though it were alive, reacting to the energy around her. As she walked deeper into the forest, the trees grew taller and darker, their trunks twisted into unnatural shapes. Strange symbols were carved into the bark, symbols that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Adama felt a cold chill run down her spine. She had heard of these symbols, rumors passed down by the elders. They were the marks of the spirits that once protected the forest, and now they were a warning. Suddenly, the path before her opened up into a clearing. At the center of the clearing stood an ancient stone altar, covered in moss and vines. It was here, in this sacred place, that the old woman had given her the stone. Adama approached the altar slowly, her heart racing. She could feel the weight of the forest pressing in on her, as if it were watching her every move. At the altar, she paused. The stone in her hand was now glowing faintly, pulsing with energy. She could hear a faint whispering, like voices carried on the wind. They were too quiet to understand, but they were unmistakably there. The spirits of the forest were speaking to her. Return what you have taken, the voices seemed to say. Restore what was lost. Adama took a deep breath and placed the stone on the altar. The moment her fingers left it, the air around her shifted. The ground trembled slightly, and the sky above darkened, as though the very heavens were reacting to her actions. A gust of wind blew through the clearing, and for a moment everything seemed to freeze in time. Then, from the shadows at the edge of the clearing, a figure emerged. It was the old woman, the one who had given her the stone in the first place. But now, she was different. Her eyes glowed with an ethereal light, and her voice rang out with a power that made the ground beneath Adama's feet shake. You have come to undo what you have done, the woman said, her voice both gentle and terrifying. But do you understand the cost? Adama swallowed hard, her throat dry. I didn't know what I was doing, she said, her voice trembling. I only wanted to help my father. I only wanted to bring prosperity to the village. But I was wrong. Please undo this. I didn't mean to harm anyone. The old woman studied her for a long moment, her eyes piercing into Adama's soul. You are not the first to seek the power of the forest. Many have come before you, with pure intentions, but they too were tempted by the law of magic. You cannot take from nature without giving something back. Adama looked down at the stone, now resting on the altar, its glow dimming. What must I give back? The woman's expression softened, though her eyes still held a warning. You must give what you have gained, but not just the stone. You must give up your desire for power, for wealth, and for control. The forest will take what it is owed, and you will return to the balance. The choice. The woman stepped back, and the air around Adama thickened with the weight of the decision before her. She had thought she could simply return the stone and make everything right, but the forest demanded more. The curse had taken root deep within her, her desire for more, for control, for prosperity at any cost. Adama's mind raced. The village, her father, her dreams, were they worth sacrificing? What would happen if she gave it all up? Would she lose everything she had gained? Make your choice, Adama, the woman's voice echoed, her words like a final warning. The balance must be restored, but the price will be steep. The clearing was silent except for the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. Adama stood before the ancient altar, her heart pounding in her chest, torn between the choice laid out before her and the life she had so carefully built. The old woman, the guardian of the forest, watched her with an air of patient expectation. It was as if the forest itself was waiting, holding its breath, as the decision that would affect the fate of not just Adama, but the entire village, hung in the balance. Adama's fingers lingered near the stone on the altar. She had come so far, fought so hard for this prosperity, only to find that it carried a curse she could not escape. The world she had dreamed of was slipping through her fingers. The villagers, once grateful for her wealth, had grown fearful. Even Kobina, her closest friend, no longer smiled when they met. He avoided her eyes, his face drawn with suspicion. What had gone wrong? Was this the price of ambition, the inevitable consequence of wanting too much? The old woman stepped closer, her ethereal glow casting strange shadows across the clearing. Her eyes, glowing like two twin moons, never left Adama's face. You are torn, child, the old woman said, her voice soft but heavy with authority. You understand, now, that you cannot escape the consequences of your desire. The spirits have granted you this test, and it is not the first time someone has stood here, in the same place, with the same choice. Adama's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Am I the first to make such a mistake? The woman's smile was like the first light of dawn, fleeting and mysterious. You are not the first, Adama. But the spirits will not spare those who forget the balance between giving and taking. It is a lesson that even the greatest of men must learn. The magic of the forest does not come without a price. Adama swallowed hard. I understand now. I have taken too much. But what must I give in return to restore the balance? What will the forest demand from me? The woman's gaze deepened, and the wind seemed to hush, as if the forest itself were listening intently. You will give back what you have gained, the wealth, the power, the prosperity you took from the land. But there is more. You must give up something far more precious, your desire for control, your greed for more. The magic that you wielded so freely is a force of nature. It does not bend to your will, but to the will of the spirits. Adama's hands trembled. Her mind raced as the implications of the old woman's words sank in. She would lose everything, the bounty she had gathered, the power she had so eagerly embraced. And perhaps even worse, she would have to relinquish the part of herself that had yearned for more than she could ever have. Are you saying that the only way to restore balance is to give up everything I've gained? Adama asked, her voice small, almost a whisper. The woman nodded slowly. Yes. To restore what was lost, you must become empty, like the earth after a great storm. You must relinquish your claim on the future and return to the simplicity of life before the magic took root. The weight of the choice pressed upon Adama's chest. She looked down at the stone in her hands. The smooth surface now seemed cold and alien. It had once been a symbol of her dreams, her future. And yet, it was also a symbol of her greatest mistake. For a long moment, there was only the sound of her own breath and the rustle of the leaves. The village seemed a distant memory now, almost like a dream from which she had awakened. Could she truly give up everything? The land that had flourished under her care. The animals that had thrived. Her father's pride in her success. Why must it be this way? Adama asked, her voice thick with emotion. Why must there be such a price for everything? The old woman sighed, her form shifting like smoke in the breeze. Because the forest is a living thing, child. It gives, but it also takes. Prosperity, power, wealth, these are not things meant to last forever in the hands of one person. The forest exists to maintain balance, and in that balance, there is no place for greed. The spirits have watched you, and they are waiting for you to choose. Adama closed her eyes. She thought of her father, Kofi, whose health had begun to fail under the strain of the strange magic she had unleashed. She thought of the villagers, who had once admired her but now looked upon her with fear and suspicion. She thought of Kobina, who had once been her closest friend and now barely spoke to her. All of them, all of it, had been built on a foundation of deception, of taking what wasn't truly hers to claim. Perhaps it was time to let it all go. With a deep breath, Adama made her choice. She would return to the balance. She would give up the stone and all that it represented. She would return to the simplicity of life before the magic, before the hunger for more had consumed her. I choose to restore the balance, she said, her voice trembling but resolute. The old woman's smile returned, this time warmer, almost approving. You have made the right choice, Adama. The spirits will honor your decision. As soon as the words left the woman's lips, the clearing seemed to shift. The trees around them rustled as though in agreement, and the air felt lighter. The oppressive weight that had hung over Adama for so long lifted, as though the forest itself were breathing again. But just as quickly, something shifted within Adama. A sudden emptiness filled her, a hollowness that was both a relief and a grief. The power she had once held, the magic that had given her so much, was now gone. The stone, which had pulsed with energy moments before, had become nothing more than a smooth, cold rock in her hands. She could feel the energy of the forest flowing through her, but it was no longer hers to command. The old woman stepped back, her form becoming one with the shadows of the trees. The spirits have been appeased. You may now return to your village, but remember, prosperity is not found in riches, but in the balance of life itself. Adama nodded, though her heart felt heavy. She turned away from the altar and began her journey back through the forest. The path was clearer now, the shadows less oppressive. The wind seemed to carry a song of renewal, as if the forest itself had forgiven her. Return to the village. Adama's journey back to the village was long and arduous, but the burden she had carried for so long now seemed lighter. The weight of magic had been lifted from her shoulders, and though she no longer had the wealth and power she had once enjoyed, she felt something more profound, peace. When she reached the village, the changes were immediate. The air seemed clearer, the land more fertile, and the animals once again healthy. The village, though still weary, felt different, like it had been cleansed of a lingering poison. The people, too, seemed to sense the shift. There was still fear in their eyes, but it was tempered by curiosity. And there, in the heart of the village, stood Kobina. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then, slowly, he approached. Adama, he said quietly, I didn't understand. I was afraid. But now, I see. You've given up so much. Adama smiled softly, her heart swelling with a strange mixture of sorrow and relief. I have given up what was never truly mine. The forest has restored the balance, and I have learned that true wealth is found in what we give, not what we take. Kwabena nodded, his eyes reflecting the understanding that had taken root in him as well. You've done the right thing. We've all been wrong, in one way or another. The days following Adoma's return to the village were quiet but transformative. The land, once poisoned by greed and unchecked magic, now began to heal. Crops that had withered under the influence of her wishes slowly regained their vibrancy. The animals, once thin and sickly, grew plump and strong. The sky, which had once seemed oppressive and heavy, cleared, bathing the village in golden sunlight once more. But despite the visible changes, the villagers remained uncertain. They had witnessed the prosperity that Adoma's magic had brought, and the loss of that prosperity left them hesitant. Trust had been shattered, and though the land was recovering, their faith in Adama and in themselves was not easily restored. Adama understood this, and she knew her path to redemption would be long and difficult. She did not expect immediate forgiveness. The past was something that could not be undone with a simple act of contrition. But she had made peace with the forest, and now, she needed to make peace with her village. She visited the village square every day, helping the elders with the healing herbs and offering assistance wherever she could. Though they spoke little to her, there was a quiet recognition that she was no longer the same person who had once tempted fate. Her hands, once greedy for riches, were now steady in their labor. One afternoon, as she walked through the village, a familiar voice called her name. Adama. It was Kwabena. She turned, and her heart leaped in her chest. Kwabena was standing by the village well, his face warmer than the last time they had spoken. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, his eyes were no longer filled with fear or suspicion but with understanding. Kwabena, Adama said, her voice tinged with relief. How are you? Better, he replied, smiling gently. The crops are growing again. The animals are healthy. The village, it's healing, Adama. She nodded, her gaze softening as she met his eyes. I didn't realize, Kwabena. I didn't understand the true cost of what I sought. The forest, the spirits, they made me see that there is no magic that can bring true happiness, only what we can create with our own hands and hearts. Kwabena stepped closer. You have taught me a great deal, Adama. I think we all needed to learn this lesson. The forest showed you the way, but now, it's up to us to rebuild, together. Adama's heart swelled at his words. It was as if, in that moment, the healing of the village was not just the land growing fertile again, but the people coming together once more. The balance, Kwabena, she said, her voice thick with emotion. It's not just about the land or the magic. It's about understanding that we are all connected. What we take, we must also give. Yes, Kwabena said, his voice soft. And you have given more than you know. A gathering of elders. As the days passed, word of Adama's return to humility spread throughout the village. The elders, who had once been suspicious of her, began to take notice of her actions. She had not only given up the power she had wielded but had also worked tirelessly to help the village recover. Her selflessness had begun to shine through, and the seeds of trust were slowly being sown. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the village settled into a peaceful quiet, the elders gathered in the large meeting hut. Adama was summoned to join them. She walked into the room with a sense of quiet anticipation, knowing this would be the moment when the true test of her redemption would come. The elder chief, an imposing man with grey hair and wise eyes, gestured for her to sit. Adama, he began, his voice heavy with the weight of the past. We have seen the changes in the land. The crops have returned, the animals are healthy again, and the village is recovering. But we have also seen the transformation in you. You have paid the price for the imbalance you brought upon us. Adama lowered her eyes, but there was no anger in her heart. She had long accepted the price of her actions. The elder continued, his voice firm but kind. The question now is this: what will you do with the knowledge you have gained? The spirits have restored the balance, but only you can ensure that the lessons of the forest remain with you and with this village. Adama thought carefully before answering. I will help rebuild, not just the land, but the trust of the people. I will be their servant, their guide, and together, we will ensure that greed never takes root again. The elder nodded, his gaze piercing but approving. That is the path to true leadership, Adama. You have learned the hardest lesson of all, that true power lies not in what we take, but in what we give. The other elders murmured their agreement, and a quiet warmth filled the room. Adama felt something stir inside her, a sense of peace and fulfillment she had never known before. She had made the right choice. A new beginning. The next few months were filled with a quiet restoration. Adama worked alongside the villagers to repair what had been broken, not just the land, but the bonds between them. She encouraged them to work together, to share in the task that had once been hers alone. Slowly but surely, the village began to heal, not just in body, but in spirit. Kwabena, once distant and weary, became a close ally in the efforts to restore the village. They spent many days together, tending to the crops, gathering the herbs, and rebuilding the foundations of their community. Their bond, once fractured by fear and suspicion, grew stronger as they shared their labor and their understanding of the true meaning of balance. One day, as they stood together looking over the village, Kwabena turned to Adama and smiled. "Do you think the spirits are watching us?" he asked. Adama looked up at the sky, the sun casting a warm glow over the fields. "I think the spirits are always watching, Kwabena. But more than that, I think they are in us. In our choices, our actions, our willingness to grow. As long as we remember that, we will never stray too far from the balance." Kwabena nodded, and for the first time in a long while, the village felt at peace. The air was still, the land fertile, and the people united in their understanding of the balance that had been restored. Adama had learned that prosperity was not something to be hoarded, but something to be shared. And in that sharing, there was a deeper magic, the magic of community, of connection, of giving and receiving in harmony with the world around them. As she looked out over the village, Adama knew that her journey was not yet complete. There would be more challenges, more lessons to learn, but she was no longer afraid. The forest had shown her the way, and now, with the support of her people, she was ready to walk that path with humility and grace.